Disclaimer: the following requires a certain knowledge of natural law and the trivium for full understanding, as well as a background knowledge of Nietzsche and his work Zarathustra and Ecce Homo. Let's begin. The famous psychology superstar, Dr. Jordan Peterson, estimated the IQ of Friedrich Nietzsche to be well around 260. For comparison, the IQ of Einstein himself is said to have been 140. This being said, it is no wonder how Nietzsche could write as he could, saying, according to himself, that he could encapsulate within one sentence that which others can't even lay out in an entire book. It is no wonder how he could manage to foresee Germany's imminent future 30 years beforehand, and how he could predict the consequences of God's death. Something that Dr. Peterson spoke about in length. But there is something I discovered in Nietzsche's writings that caught my attention a while ago. Something so drastic that I could not stop wondering about it, especially given the strange wording. Quote, "For when truth enters the lists, against the falsehood of ages, shocks are bound to ensue, and a spell of earthquakes, followed by the transposition of hills and valleys, such as the world has never yet imagined, even in its dreams. The concept politics then becomes elevated entirely to the sphere of spiritual warfare. All the mighty realms of the ancient order of society are blown into space, for they are all based on falsehood. There will be wars, the like of which have never been seen on earth before." End quote. Initially I was tempted to think that he was talking about the problems that gave rise to the First and Second World War. He saw those problems and the reasons behind that in remarkable detail. There is, however, nothing there that would qualify as a falsehood of ages. Nothing that would trigger an event so dramatic that it would blow the order of society into space, to shake the system in such a way that the earth quakes and the mountains come crushing down. Surely there have been wars, and this caught me initially, the like of which have never been seen on earth before. But with all respect to the unspoken drama, it seems far from the level he seems to try and paint there. And then there is the major problem of the falsehood of ages still remaining. And what truth is he talking about? This does not at all fit in the context of either the First or Second World War. Now, if I didn't think I had discovered this great falsehood, this great lie, I would not have made this video. It came to me when I dedicated a significant portion of time to studying natural law. Let me ask you, have you ever wondered why not a single empire managed to last over time? Many empires have risen over the ages. Countless empires. Different they were in location, time, society, size and kind. But they all have one thing in common. They all fell. Thousands and thousands of them tried, and all failed. Not one single empire made it. Now what could possibly be the reason for that? First of all, we can make very clear, the concept empire is something that simply does not work. Period. But why? What is the core? What is the pure essence of the problem? Is it the size? Is it the urbanization? The holding of slaves? The wars? Insufficient tribute payments? The taking of land? No. Those are merely symptoms. Symptoms of an underlying problem that gives rise to those issues. And this big, all-encompassing problem is a simple misconception. Which is the assumption that one side's, or one party's authority over the other, for whatever reason, can be morally legitimate. Let me say that again. The assumption that one side's, or one party's, authority over the other, for whatever reason, can be morally legitimate. This issue right there is as good as a beginning of all evil as it gets. Here is an example. Imagine you work and make $100. Now I come to you and tell you to give me $1. Call me human, call me cop, call me government, it doesn't matter. And it is just $1. Imagine a 1% tax. This isn't too bad, right? Wrong. It is as bad as it can get. Because if the assumption that something like that can be legitimate for whatever reason is left standing, it can grow. And it will. Because it must. This is what you need to do if you want to get one foot in the gates of hell. literally. And since this concept isn't static, but necessarily growing, those gates do open bit by bit. And before you know it, you are looking at 2% tax, and then 20%, because if you can be told to give up 1% of your earnings by another entity that must therefore claim authority over you, the 2% aren't far off, and soon neither are the 20. This then will grow and jump ship from a claim on your money to a claim on your belongings, and ultimately a claim on you yourself, and a claim on your money, something that you have earned by producing something using your body, can be nothing else but a claim on your very body. The definition of slavery. And this is what tax-financed, state-led societies that have been built by people who are subject to authorities who tell them what to do are based on. The fatal misconception that it can be legal and morally legitimate to have claims leveled onto them that undermine their natural and absolutely necessary sovereignty, their natural rights. This is the big misconception, the ancient falsehood, on which the empires and states for all times have built, and thus must fall, being totally blown apart, once truth, meaning the discovery of the fact that it can never be morally legitimate, hence right, to claim authority over another sentient being, is in effect the discovery of human sovereignty, the sovereignty of all sentient beings. And when people, after discovering this, finally become wise, meaning they transition this very fundamental truth they have learned into action and start going against this major wrongdoing, this ancient crime against humanity, by the establishment, the ancient order of society, there will be a liberation blow, a blow that will shake the earth unlike anything that has ever been seen before. And with this understanding, we read Nietzsche's prophecy again. For when truth, meaning the knowledge of sovereignty and natural law, enters the lists, against the falsehood of ages, meaning the assumption that one human's or organization's authority of any kind, over another sentient being, can be morally legitimate, shocks are bound to ensue, and a spell of earthquakes, followed by the transposition of hills and valleys, such as the world has never yet imagined, even in its dreams. The concept politics, then becomes elevated entirely to the sphere of spiritual warfare. All the mighty realms of the ancient order of society, meaning all that has been built, and thought, under the flag of slavery, are blown into space, for they are all based on falsehood, again, the falsehood to assume that one's authority over another can be naturally legal. End quote. Now we know what this truth is. And now we know what the falsehood is. We know that the very way of life of the so-called elite depends on maintaining this structure, at the cost of the lives and freedoms and sovereignty of the people. Something that includes all the willing slaves who will likely side with them. Sadly, this great war is inevitable, because neither the elite nor the willing slaves will ever give up the current system of crime and slavery. They control every function of society, they hold the key to every door, even to the people's minds. They decide what can be said, thus ever thought, thus done, and they will never ever stop. Not only won't they ever stop, they will never stop leaning over, further and further over you, until they are inside your body and even inside your mind, quite literally. #Neuralink. And all the other programs. They force their way into your pockets, into your homes, into your bodies, into your minds. And it all started with 1% tax. If you remember, this is how the gates of hell open. And sooner or later, this underlying, creeping misconception, that a beginning of this, can be morally right, must manifest in reality. And in the early 2020s, it stepped out in the open, making a transition, from a bureaucratic, to a real-life claw, reaching for you physically, on a never-before-seen scale. A necessary consequence of this disease brewing below the surface, for centuries. Escalating to no end, all-encompassing, all-controlling. Until it finally collapses under its own weight, grinding you to dust. As it always does. Only to be built back up again. For another round of misery and enslavement. It can, and it will never stop. So sooner or later it must be confronted. And this can only happen by truth manifesting in this world. By people becoming aware of this madness. and by them building up capacities of armed force, I repeat, armed force, so great, that it can challenge the system. Because only a mind, freed by this truth, combined with the iron fist, of trained, and heavily armed individuals, working together, for the great goal, can bring about true change. It will be this great day, when enough people have learned the truth and have broken out of that mental cage, to finally decide to do something about their enslavement. Decide to finally break free, by force, because there is no other way. So that there will be a liberation blow, that will leave the ancient order of crime, and slavery, in ruins. A great, necessarily inevitable, world-encompassing war, that will shake the earth, and the day this war ends, the moment it is over, and mankind has won, will be the first moment, of actual freedom. Then, at last, the first breath of our kind, as free beings will be taken. And it will be the first breath of our lives. Ubi quem.